Hello and welcome to the second video in the three-part video series on Platformer Lab. The three parts are the pickup, which we did in the previous video. If you haven't watched that video, that's okay. With these first two videos you can watch in any order. But this one we're going to be working on the elevator, and the last of the three videos is on the HUD, or the heads-up display. So to start with, this is the lab we have that we've already created some pickups, but if you don't have these, that's fine. You can basically start from a blank project here. So what we're going to be working on in this video is the elevator, or moving platform. And so if you can imagine, what are some of the things that the elevator can do? And it can move up and down, so we could have a platform like this that moves up, and then when it gets to a certain point we want it to start moving back down. And similarly, we could have a platform that starts here and moves to the right like this over some duration. And so we can also make doors with this, because if you can imagine you had a platform that's oriented vertically like this on a wall, and then just have the door slide up and down. And so there's a lot of things we can do with this elevator slash door or moving platform. But some of the things that are in common is we need a start point. So this point here, wherever it starts, and then we need an end point. And similarly here, this will be our start point, and this will be our end point. And so these are two vectors we're going to need, and the vector, it's a vector because we need to store three different values. We need the x, y, and z. So where is it positioned in 3D space? Because really our platform, while we just said it can move up and down or side to side, it can really move in any direction. So it can move diagonally, or diagonally in 3D space. So it's up to you. But regardless, we need a starting location and an ending location. So I'll just name that start loc and end loc. And in addition to that, we need one more thing, which is the duration. And this will be the time that it takes for the platform to move. So we don't want it to move, like if we're making a platform, we want the player to be able to jump on the platforms. We don't want them to move super quickly or too slowly. So we want to be able to change this duration on each of the platforms. And so with this, you can actually build a lot of the platformers that are popular today. So most platformers have some kind of mechanic where you're jumping from platform to platform, but they also have some kind of moving platforms. So this is going to show you how to make that mechanic. So back in our engine, we've got our project, and if you haven't watched the other video yet, this will be blank, but I just created a third-person template project. And then from here, to start with, I'm going to create a new blueprint. I'm going to call it elevator BP. So this will be an actor because it is visible in the world. Elevator BP underscore BP. And then I'll open that up. Snap it on here. And to start with, we need a static mesh. And so the static mesh is just, what we want it to be represented by in the 3D space. So what is our mesh? So add a static mesh. And then for this, I'll just leave it static mesh because it could be anything. But what I'm going to do is change it to I'm going to choose a static mesh that already exists, because I want this to, by default, I want this to be a platform. And so there's actually some platforms in the standard assets, and the one I'm going to pick is floor underscore 400 by 400. So this will be a good kind of starting point for our what we want, because this will be a reasonable size for our character to jump onto. And then I can put a texture on there or material, and for this I'm just going to pick M brick clay new. And if these aren't showing up, just make sure if the floor 400 by 400 and the brick clay new material are not showing up, make sure that you imported your standard assets, or not your standard assets, but your starting assets during the project creation. So I'll compile and save that, and then go back to our map and move our character back just a little bit. And so now if I place this in the world, I've actually got a platform already that I can use. I forgot for this lab the jump is disabled, so I'm gonna move this down just a little bit, but it's really not necessary that I be able to jump on these platforms just now. It's really just to show how they're going to work. So right now this is just a static mesh like it says, and it's going to just stay put. So we need something to move the platforms back and forth. And to do the movement, there's something called an interpolation. And so that allows, basically it does all the math for you to figure out where to place this elevator or this platform over time. So if you think about it, if I have the platform starting here and I want to move it to here over the course of a few seconds, then I have to think, okay, frame 1, it's going to move a little bit. Frame 2, it's going to move a little bit. 3, a little bit, like that. And so we would have to do a lot of math to figure out, like, okay, where's it going to be on each frame? And then when it gets to the end, do the math to make it come back, right? So there's actually a component built into Unreal that allows you that does almost all of that automatically. So we're going to add that to our platform, or to our elevator BP. And for that, it's just called interp to movement. And interp stands for interpolate, and that just means to find kind of a point between 2 points. And so if you think about it, we're going to be setting these 2 points, the starting point and the ending point, and we want to find all the points in between as the platform is moving. But we don't want to have to do all that work ourselves. So this interp to movement component is going to actually do that for us. And so the other things we need, if we go to our event graph, because we're going to need a little bit of code here, is a couple of variables. So as I mentioned before, we need a start location, an end location, and a duration. So we've got where the platform starts, where it ends, and then how long it takes to move. So I'm going to create a new variable, call this start location. And we don't want it to be a Boolean, we want it to be a vector. And the reason for that, of course, is that it's a point in 3D space, so it'll have an X, Y, and Z value. And so if I compile and save, you can see that these are by default set to 0. And let's see. Yeah, so these are going to be what in our interp to movement, what this component calls control points. So the other thing I'm going to need to do is make this variable instance editable, and that allows this component to be different for each platform we create. So we want our platform to be really flexible so that we can have one that maybe goes side to side, another one that goes up and down. If we don't have this instance editable set, then this variable is going to be the same for all of our platforms, but we want it to be able to be different. The other thing we want to do is show 3D widget. And this is kind of a special, and then also expose on spawn. But the reason we need the show 3D widget is because this actually adds another component or another control gizmo into our level designer. So it's kind of hard to tell here, but in addition to this control point to move the entire object, if we click on click on this tetrahedron next to the start location, we can actually move it out. I'm gonna hang on a second because there's some beeping. Alright, hopefully that's done now. So if we click on this tetrahedron, we can actually slide it out and move it around. So that's kind of interesting, because if we wanted our start location to be at some other point, then we could do that. But really, I just want the start location to be on this corner for now. And then we can create another point called an end location. For that one, I'm just going to duplicate this vector, because we want it to have all the same properties. We want it to have a 3D widget. We want it to be instance editable, and expose on spawn. So put end location. Make sure that's spelled correctly. Compile and save. So if we go back here, we can see we've got end location, and it's really hard to tell, but there's the start location underneath that. But if I click here, I can drag off the end location. So let's say I want this platform, like I said before, I was going to slide back and forth. So let me actually move that back down and then slide the end location over here. So in this case, I'm wanting the platform to move from here to here, and then I really want it to move back as well, back to the start, and just keep going back and forth. So if I try to play this, it's not actually going to do anything because I haven't set up my interp to movement component yet. But to do that, I'm going to go to my construction script, and so when this elevator BP is created, I want to set a couple of things up. And the first thing I need to do is get a reference to my interp to movement, because really we're just going to be setting a couple things on this component. And I want to set the control points. I mentioned before, these two, the start location and end location, are control points in my interp to movement component. Now this is an array, so we could actually have more than 2 locations. So we could have our platform move more than just back and forth. We could have it move to multiple locations. But for this example, I'm just going to have these 2 locations it's going to move between. So I want to connect the execution pins. And then in order to actually create a control point array, I need to drag off of here and type make array. And then I think what I can do is just grab the start location and connect it. Okay, I can't connect there. I actually need to make a drag off of here and make an interp control point. So this is a special node that converts a location or a vector into an interp control point. And it has this extra property. We'll just leave that set. Okay, and then so that position is relative is important because our start location starts at 0, 0, 0. We don't want that to be the world location. We want that to be relative to where the object is placed in the world. So we want another control point in our array. So I'll add a pin, and I can just copy this with Control W and connect these, and then drag out my end location with Control so that it grabs the getter, connect that. And so now I've got my control points set for my interp to movement component. Last thing I would need to do is set the duration, so how long it takes to move between these control points. So if I drag off of here, actually I'll drag off of the interp to movement component and type set duration. So this is a built-in value in in the interpretive movement component that is just how long do we want this to take. And so we want to expose this as a variable so that it can be different on each platform. We don't want it to be the same across platforms. So I need to add one more variable. This one is going to be duration or time, something like that. And for this one, we want it to be a float, since I'll change variable type because the value that we need is a float. So I've got my duration. I need to compile and save in order to get my default value to show up here. And by default, I'm going to set this to 3. So then it'll take 3 seconds to move between these 2 points, and then I'll drag this off with Control, click, and connect to my duration, and connect my execution pin, and then compile and save again. And now I'm going to test this out, see if it's actually all working. Okay, so if you notice what happened there, platform is moving. It actually takes 3 seconds to get there, and then it stops. And so the reason it's stopping is just because of the way we have our interpretive movement component configured. So if I click on that, the behavior type is what I'm interested in. So if I search here for behavior, to remember it's the British English spelling. So there's a couple of options here. The teleport type, or the option that we want, is the behavior type, and instead of one shot, we want that to be ping pong. So ping pong means it's going to move back and forth just like a ping pong ball would. And if we play it now, we should see this effect. So it takes 3 seconds to get there, and then 3 seconds to get back. And all we have to do to change some of these values, now that we have actually made variables for these values, we can do things like we could change the end location to be up here. And if we wanted to make it move faster, we could find the duration here. Let's see. I think I may need to compile and save again. Oh, I know what I need to do. So in my duration, I need to set this to instance editable, and I'll do expose on spawn, but main thing is the instance editable. So now it shows up here. So if I wanted to make this faster, I could do 1 second. And I also, you saw I moved this end location to the sky. So there we go. We've got it moving up and down just like that. So if we wanted to make something that kind of mimicked a door opening and closing, if you can imagine, we can use this same blueprint, but instead of having it flat on the floor like this, we can rotate it. So let's say I rotate it like this, 90 degrees. And then if I select my end location here, I can move it up to this corner, and then if I hit play, you can see it raises up just like a door would. So that's basically it for this component. And so the next one we'll learn how to do, the next video in this series, we'll learn how to do the HUD, which is going to make this a little bit more interesting. So as you saw if you've seen the previous video, you'll see messages popping up in the left about the health and the points and the bombs and stuff. So this is just, we're going to add a HUD so that this actually looks nice. Like we'll have a little bar in the top for our health and a points or a score up here in the left. So that's it for the elevator / platform. Hope that wasn't too complicated. It's really just adding this interp to movement component, and then setting up the control points and the duration. See you in the next video.